Joe, thank you all for coming today. We have another OKBA meetup for November. I'm here to introduce our new speaker. This is Marc Schadee. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
No, I never do. I never said it right. It's a good friend of mine that I've known for years, and I haven't yet pronounced his last name correctly. I apologize.
It's a unique one, though.
It's a good one. That's good. Yeah. All right. I think everybody, I saw who was online a minute ago. If there's new people online, I haven't seen it, but because I'm having a tattoo because I do that. But I think everybody online already knows who we are and what we do, so I'll skip all of that and hand it over to you.
Cool.
I'll switch over your thing for you.
Thank you. I got it over to you.
Yes, sir. So while it's happening, I'll just kind of give a brief overview of what we're talking about, starting with where the information came from, because that recommends one of the sources. So the majority of the information I've got from a book called Creating Great Choices, and another book called Polarity Management. A third book that I highly recommend in tandem with this is called Agile Conversations, but it's more of a how to decompose your conversations, understand what your mindset is at. A little different. But today, we're going to be talking about navigating resistance and agile transformation, but really it's about how to argue. And how to stop arguing in a way that's not productive. So the other name for this,
There it goes.
okay. So fights about story points aren't fights about story points, which I'm not going to actually be talking about them. But if you work at a Scrum team or know anything about story points are kind of an abstract measure that have, 3-4 components, right? So really when you're discussing story points, you have an underlying thing. It's an effort concern. It is a complexity concern. It is a risk or an unknown concern. So the thing that I want to draw your attention to with this is when you're talking about regular arguments, the same thing applies. Generally, the topic at hand is not really what's being discussed. There's an underlying current to that. There we go. So how I want to start this is kind of taught mostly through action this way of arguing, which is very fixed mindset oriented. So with that, we have either or. So when you have an argument, it's either my way or your way, right? And I'm going to fight for all of my way against all of your way. Or, my way is better, your way is worse, the us versus them mentality. This is also fixed though, because you'll be part of the solution on the cutting room floor, which is the other person's problem. Okay, whatever they're having is also an issue. And if you don't take that into consideration, you're not going to solve the problem completely. You're going to solve a symptom of it at best. So what I want to introduce is this, which is both and thinking. Or other way of looking at it, if you're familiar with fixed versus growth, is growth mindset. It's not, we have one pizza for everybody. We can go out and buy more pizzas. So how do we incorporate both sides of the argument? And how do we find a solution that wins for everyone? So this is a story. And all I want you to do is, as we go through this, think about how this can relate to your world. What I've done here is kind of related to mine. I work with a company called Signet. And what we're doing right now is in the digital area, transforming it into more of an agile system. The thing is no system is all the way agile. No system is all the way waterfall. Everybody falls in between, right? And the key thing is, and towards the end, we'll get into this, is these are polls around one concern. So with that in mind, just imagine your average agile transformation, your average amount of teams that are, hey, we've been very successful in the way we're working. Why do we need to change? Right? With that, the first thing you got to do in any argument is understand the core components, right? You're not doing that. What are you really doing, right? You're just arguing your points. So if you don't understand where they're coming from first and the core reasons why they're having the conversation, you might be having a completely different conversation than that person. Anyone been in that argument? As a fan of arguing, I've been in that many a time. Okay. Thank you for being honest. So the thing though is let's establish really what we're talking about first, right? And this goes to everything from how we use language. For instance, some people use agile to mean a process or velocity. Some use it to mean a set of processes. Some may use it to mean frameworks or my favorite, we're doing agile versus being agile, right? These are all definitions. So you have to kind of align with what you're saying, why you're saying it, why do you care? So the first thing you need to do is understand what they're saying before this happens. And then you ideally do this over a wide swath of people because you're not transforming one person, you're transforming an area or group. But if you're even understanding one, this is still applicable. The goal here, though, is you're going to distill these into arguments, actual things that people are saying to you. And they will fall into either an either or argument or something that can be transferred into a both and argument. So with that, the two arguments we have here, you can see up here. And what we want to do is understand this is the core claim. This is what they're saying, why we want waterfall, not agile. And again, remember spectrums, no one's truly waterfall, no one's truly agile. It's also part of how you interpret this long term, because they believe what they're doing is working for them, but that isn't really waterfall probably. It's some various, they've bastardized to their particular way of doing it and view that as a way because it's worked for them. So they have an experience well, they say this works for them well. I'm not changing. This is really this one. My experience well, my personal experience with the processes at hand tell me this is working perfectly. I don't know anything else. So it's hard for me to attach that. The second one is a fear. It's not based on their experience well, it's a fear about the change. So if you look at these are different arguments, right? I'm scared of this change. The other one is what I know works. So why should I change? Both of these have to be addressed, and they actually have to be addressed differently. Once you get the core claims right, supporting arguments. Why do you believe this is the case? Oops. There we go. Hang on, it's going backwards. I got it. Good. Yeah. Okay. So what are the supporting points? So with that, okay, so what are your subpoints? I'm going to drag Drew in this a little bit because we play pool occasionally and we like to argue. We both like to argue. If you don't know that about audio, but and so one of the things we have to get into is why do we believe what we believe? Okay, and that establishes whether it's a fear, here's my fears, or here's what the things I value about the certainty that I have from my own experience well. And most arguments come into those two categories. Once you understand these, you begin to be able to address them. So you're able to say, okay, well, if it's fear, how do I approach fear? You're going to do that differently than a person that's coming from a place of certainty. I know what works well. So again, ways. The other part then is assumptions. So the difference here is you have supporting arguments, but which of those are assumptions? And you're going to find a lot of these tend to be about their experience. So they're going to assume based on the prior experience, this always works. I hope everybody knows waterfall doesn't work in every scenario. Neither does agile in its most pure form, right? So in reality, nothing's going to work perfectly except a customized system for that area. Whether that's more waterfall leading or more agile, totally depends. But they're always going to assume what's been working is going to keep working for them. And until you introduce change in a way that's comfortable, they're not going to move away from that. These people, the fear here, they're like, all I've heard is bad things. 70% of agile transformations fail, And it's not their own experience. It's just reinforcement of that fear. So the supporting arguments are also going to be things you can address that generally are quasi-factual or factual, but contextualized to them. And so you can just talk to them differently. And again, we'll get into this. But the evidence, so first assumptions, what can we prove about these assumptions? And we can definitely improve historically, Agile's been working for them. And this is good. We want to know what's been working for them. Even when you're transforming them into Agile versus waterfall, you want to take what works and move it into a new system. If you don't, they're not going to have any trust in the new system. The key is how do you adapt in a way that's meaningful? And then with Agile skepticism, it's mostly going to be anecdotes or I read a story about X or Y, and that has to be addressed differently. So with that, you end up with two different arguments with their different points. And the next key thing is, where do we both align? Because underneath this all, whenever you're looking at any argument, there's a unifying theme under that argument. No matter what, there's going to be something that both people can agree to. In work, it tends to be money, right? One of my favorite current sayings is we live in a capitalist society, people. We are here to make money. So if we're not making money or producing, and I know a lot of your government, so the same thing applies, value instead of money for y'all. What are we doing? So if we can align to the core concept that first, we want value. Yes, we do. We all want to produce things of high quality. They're important that impact the world about us. You can start from there and build up your arguments to show how you can improve that while taking into consideration what they have currently. So again, what we're talking about here, successful outcomes, valuing predictability, even agile values predictability, nothing valuing chaos. The other thing is, what are unique themes? So we have where we align, but remember how I was talking about, you remember how you were arguing a different point than the other person? The unique themes. Well, yeah, it works for them this way, but we have this very specific thing that if we don't do it this specific way, it's going to cause us a problem. That's a unique theme. That is a sub-argument to the main argument, so to speak, that is independent to usually one person or group. So in that case, you always want to make sure you know these so you can adapt them. Because the thing is, they're going to have a specific case, and do you really care about that on the other side? Probably not. But if you can incorporate some of that into your argument to relieve that sub-argument, sometimes the main argument is not really important. Unique theme is actually what's important to that person. Sometimes that's like, I've heard in Agile, quality assurance gets less time to do work. So that's scary to me. I want to make sure we have the best quality product out there. Well, great. The work doesn't stop. We're not going to force you to stop at the end of a sprint. We want to make sure this is the highest quality and you're empowered to do that. Sometimes it's just about that education and adaptation and just educating in that moment that is helpful. But again, here, the examples were prioritizing stability and valuing the consistency, and again, moving away from that fear. With that, here's where reframing comes in. Once we understand these areas, it becomes much easier to reframe your argument to align to what your group person, leader, it needs to hear to be able to adopt that change. A lot of times, it's just a lack of information and negotiation. So first, hey, here's why waterfall in Agile will work, because sprints are really just smaller Agile waterfalls for most teams. As far as this goes, you can walk through and explain some of this. And if they do not see the value in this stability, you missed one of these, the unique themes. If you can address it with education, you're not educating on the right target to begin with. Because if it's this one, now fear is different. Again, I'll get to fear in a second, but when it comes to whether it's A or B, the educating will do it, or you need to ask more questions about what really matters. The next one is for the skepticism, which is more fear-based. So with this one, the key is to reduce the fear. More than anything, you're dealing with the person's emotion, not logic in this situation. You're just worried. One of my favorite things to talk about in the Agile transformations that we've been doing is that, hey, we want you to be afraid. We want you to be concerned. Because if you're concerned about this adoption, we want to hear it to be able to change it in a way that is going to be meaningful for you. You can take this fear that they have and turn it into action by basically empowering them to utilize that fear as fuel. Hey, you're worried about the thing you care about? Good, I am too. Tell me about it. Tell me more about it. Okay, I understand it. Could we maybe incorporate it into this way to the process? Most of the time people are like, yeah, that seems like something. And I'll give you one of the favorite tips I stole from someone else that I can't remember her quote, the magic word experiment. So when you're doing these things, most change, they feel is permanent. And they're like, I don't want to ever not go back. This is safe. I know this. Going to this whole new thing forever, they're not into that. So if you say, look, we want to hear where you're concerned. We want to try something different and adapt to your concern. We want to try it or experiment with it. We can always go backwards, but we want to try to do this something different. Let's see if it works for you. But you know what? If it doesn't work for you, promise me you'll give me the opportunity to adapt it again to your needs before we go backwards. And what this does is creates openness, transparency, and it relaxes that fear because they know they can regress. The trick is that promise at the end. You can always adapt it, to what their issues are going forward, where their concerns are, just going to keep continually adapting it till you find the right solution for them. And it's just a commitment of working with them to understand where those concerns are and adapting as you go forward. The experiment doesn't end until that person is happy. That's the whole point of the experiment or group or leader, right? So instead of saying, well, here's change, good luck, we're going to do it and go, it's easier to talk to these people and be like, look, tell me where your exact problem is. I want to hear you and change it with you. Because at the end of the day, none of you or me are going to be doing that work on the day-to-day. Those people are, okay? So if they're not bought in, they don't have a hand in the process, and you're not leveraging the knowledge they have about their area, you don't really have a hope of being successful. So you have to adapt, but the key is you don't take what they have, you take the concern that they have, right? There's a difference between, hey, what I want is a complete research out thing before it's ever getting to delivery. Number one kind of wish list I know for people. That's really not agile, guys. That's waterfall at a different level. So when you do that, you're like, okay, but what's your concern? Well, I'm worried that we're not going to have enough information to complete the work. So that's the worry, right? Well, we're not going to give you a full epic or feature, whatever you want to call it, ahead of time. How can we get you that while this team is working on? How can we introduce concepts that are going to allow and protect you the ability to keep moving this work forward? How can we connect on an ongoing basis? How can we do things like mocking and stubbing and tempting out areas until we have that information before we release it? So it's about this negotiation process. You see what I'm saying? You're not taking their solution and just applying it wholesale. You're taking the problem that that solution solves for and applying it wholesale. So this is where we get into either or both and again. So these two sets of problems, right? We've actually been talking about two of them. One is the fear one, which is an either or argument. So with that, they believe it's either waterfall or agile. And so the fear is what's keeping them on one side or the other, in this case, waterfall. The both and problem is a problem of where it has, well, I like these things and these stable elements of waterfall. Well, the thing is, again, waterfall's an ideological concept, process-wise, way over here. Agile is like 2 miles away. Everybody's in between. So they're not really following that. There's something they like about this that can easily be highlighted, adapted to, or modified to move you on that spectrum further towards agile where you're looking to go. And so where that comes in is polarity management. So this is kind of what we talked about, where it talks about the waterfall versus agile debate. But the thing is, all this is one continuum that we're talking about at work. And it really doesn't stop at waterfall, agile. Some people have brought up inertia as the other end from agile, and waterfall is kind of like in the middle now, and that's fine. The key thing is it's one thing. We're talking about how to do processes of work. And really there are ideological conflicts within those processes of work. Thing is none of those matter because you're not really at any one of those points. You're somewhere near one of those points. So what we need to do is recognize that and learn how to mitigate or balance between what are called poles. So with that, both and thinking is where polarity management starts to shine. It's one school of thought. The other one is the book I have out there. But polarity management really suggests that, like, yes, you have these two poles. You're somewhere along these poles, but even more than being somewhere between these two poles, we'll say agile, waterfall here, you're actually always in transition back and forth between these two poles. So you don't stay in any one place. A good example is my favorite buzzword of the day right now is macroeconomic conditions, right? Just talk about recessions, depressions, or whatever you want. They influence business, they influence government, elections influence government. All these things shift where you're at on this pole from one pole to another. And a good example, we'll do an exercise in a bit, but one way to think about these poles is something like individuals, teams. Those could be poles. Agile waterfall could be poles. There are many different things, but the thing about them is they're all interdependent. They're part of the same theme, I think is the best way to frame it. So when you're thinking about a theme, waterfall, agile business practices, Team versus individual, could be recognition, could be scope of work, could be accountability or responsibility issues. But those are poles that you'll have to navigate. Now, as you do this, this is the polarity map. So we'll say this is pole A and B. And we'll say, for the sake of this, it's agile and waterfall, okay? You have these 4 quadrants, and you see this path that goes through them. This is what they suggest the ideal path is. And to talk through this, this is positives for A. This is positives for B. This is negatives for B. This is negatives for A. So what you do is, let's just say you're over here, have super high agile, you're experiencing all the good, right? Problem is, nothing stays the same. Eventually that's going to change. You're going to start experiencing some of the negatives of doing too much agile. Too much decentralization is a good example. This death by committee, decisions can't be made. Those things are all negatives to agile. So as you start to experience these, we're humans, we react to them. So what do? We seek elements that can solve for it over here, which is, we'll say waterfall. So how do we have a more structured process? How do we have something more in line? And then we'll start seeing the benefits of that process. And then we start seeing the downsides, too much control, too much overhead process, too long for things to get delivered. And then again, the cycle will repeat and go back and forth. This is the positive version, y'all. The negative version is where these big loops up top are down here, and these little loops are up here. So when you sit, you feel so bad about all this stuff, you quickly try to adapt and overcorrect, get too far over here, you immediately start seeing negatives, and then you got to switch back around. The thing is, and we're going to go through an exercise in a bit here, but these 4 quadrants also have early warnings. So, and action steps. So with this, hey, wait a second, we're experiencing some of these effects. What are our early signs we're experiencing those effects? Because as soon as you are, you're going to want to start nudging to more of the other poles processes. That doesn't mean, I just want to be clear about this. This does not mean you take an agile organization, you make it immediately waterfall in every single way possible, okay? It means, what are you experiencing negatively about agile that you might introduce more waterfall or static-based processes? And how can you do those in a way you experience more of these positives than you do of these negatives? Because inevitably these positives are going to lead to negatives, guys. It's a cycle. It's just how it works. So going into that, this is where we're talking about the benefits. And this is pretty easy. So when we have those benefits, and I'm not going to, hopefully everybody knows some benefits of agile and waterfall. But if you would like primer, like get with me after this, I'll do it. But for today, I'm just going to assume a base level of knowledge, right? Once you have those, how do we get those? What are the things we can do that are going to nudge us in the direction more of one set or over the other? With those, here are some examples for agile and waterfall. So I'll give you an example that we have, because we're not agile or waterfall at Signet. We're somewhere in the middle, like most of y'all. We have both sprints and we have timelines and projected forward dates. So we're somewhere in the middle between full agile, which has no deadlines, work's done when it's done, and where waterfall sits, which is hard dates that if you run past, like you get a test case of talking to a pit, whatever, in the process or in waterfall. So the key thing is, why do we have both of these? We like the benefits of this. We also like the benefits of this. So we're going to keep both of them in place. But these are negotiable. And again, like I don't run the system. I hopefully can negotiate that system in motion and give it an option to start introducing more of these action steps to shift it to a positive. And that's what you all should consider in your jobs. Where's the organization sit that I'm looking at, group, team, or individual, in these quadrants for whatever duality they're facing? So with that, times that I just want to do a quick check. Oh, I got plenty of time. I'm ripping. So when we look at the bottom, we're now looking at early warnings. So what are the negatives? What do we really hate about Agile? Well, when nothing gets done and we can't get anything out the door because it goes or gold plating, for instance. Gold plating, development term for adding shinies onto a project past its done date because the developers generally want to. Product's pretty good about doing this too. It's called scope creep. So what are the problems? And then what are the warnings that you're seeing those problems? Because you're not in the system, generally speaking, right? You're a visitor to most of these systems. So you're going to have to notice what these early warning signs are so you can start to advocate for change before that you see up there drops way down in here and becomes a lot of suck versus the very little suck. So the argument isn't, let's go full agile. Let's go full waterfall. Where are we at on a continuum? And many of these continuums exist, but where are we at and where are we headed? And how can we limit the negatives while reaping more of the positive benefits of either system in any dual pole system? Well, the other way. There. So this is the actual chart. I did trim off the action steps and all that, but what I want to do is actually go through an exercise with you for the remainder of the time if y'all are interested. Okay, cool. So I'm actually going to take it straight out of the polarity. So the one I want to do is action and planning. This is a poll. Doing something, we're planning to do something, right? We can do both these things, but really it's about the outcome. So if we're using this, we'll say this one, action, this one's planning, right? So with those two, what would you say the benefit of action? What are the positives for action? And please,
See what works.
you can see what works, right?
Actually gets done.
Stuff gets done. First to market lives up here. If you are into different types of business plans, being the first out the door, action, you got to have it, right? Any other positives?
I think it's a positive to see what doesn't.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, being able to do rapid prototyping type concepts where you go out, throw out an idea and have it change on different pages, stuff like that. Yeah, absolutely. So if those are our positives, oh, I'm actually going backwards. Right. What are the negatives? You can do it either way, but what are the negatives with planning too much? Never get anything done. Sorry, I heard some other ones. Yeah. Death by decision by committee type concepts come into play here too. You can always refine and gold plating happens. So to solve these problems, what do we do to get these outcomes? What would be our actually, we'll start with what are our early warnings of those problems? Death by committee, not getting anything done. What would you say some of the early warning signs you would look for in a system? Scope creep. That's a good one. Yep. So I'll give you a hard metric one too. If you're will of cycle time, anyone? So you have a cycle time and you have the pre-cycle time, which I can't remember because I'm up here talking. But the pre-cycle time, the amount of time it takes before it hits delivery is a measurable thing as well. And if you see that average growing over time, you're definitely here. So what would you do to resolve some of those problems by shifting up here? What are some of your first steps that you would intervene with, we'll say for scope creep? Yeah, and I'll describe a little bit more because sometimes it's hard to latch on to. Let's just say you have stakeholders are the cause of scope creep. I'm just going to give you that right off the bat. So if stakeholders are hacking your system to increase the level of requirements on work that's in progress, what are some early steps you can do to inhibit that?
Maybe you like clearly define scope.
Yeah. What's in and out of scope document? That's a great one. That's an excellent one. Yep, because as soon as you have that, you can defend against that on any project, right? Another is to introduce MVP methodology with epics. So sure, we'll get it to you, an MVP +3, because we're going to deliver what's most valuable first and iterate on it, right? So you make a promise, but then prioritize it super low because it's not actually valuable based off of other work you have, so on and so forth. So those are methods that start the transition from these negatives into these positives, right? So now we're going to go this way. I'm going to do it the other way this time. So we're going to go negatives to positives. So what are some negatives of action?
Nothing works.
Nothing works. That's an excellent one. Yep. Or other shit breaks. Oh, sorry, I cuss. Yeah. I'll call that firefighting.
Learning all the things.
Yep. Yep. That's an excellent one. So those are our problems. What are the early warnings of those problems? We'll go to that next. Okay, so to transition this into a metric, we're looking at slop from a sprint or missing committed to completed as a way to see this. That's one way. Yep. So we also had, what was yours, Drew? And sorry, yours was nothing gets done, right? Okay, so how do we know an early warning sign of nothing getting done? Never delivering, but that's actually kind of like you're in the rear view at that point, right? So part of it's what you're already said, though. This slop from sprint to sprint is going to cause it, but there's other ways to know this too. Yep. I'd say your error rate's actually a really great one. So what are the bugs that escape to sprint? That is a great way to tell that you're starting to go in that direction because you try to shove too much into sprint, the information's too light. So your devs are interpreting things in a way or having to rush through work in a way that's creating extra bugs. So there's potential this could be a bug rate as well. So with that, not delivering, having delayed, we'll say sprint delivery commitments, and missing or having late releases are good ways to start seeing that. Retrospectives are another good way. If you get information out of a retrospective, again, psychologically safe. I'm not advocating spy on people, but like, what are you guys working on or improving in your world? What's your main concerns kind of stuff? That'll pop up here too. Because it'll be like, I feel like we're getting all this work thrown at us in a short timeline. And they could express it very early in a retrospective. You get something that's supposed to be 6 sprints long, and they're going to be complaining sprint 2 because they know how much work they have, right? So there's early signs inside of sprints and things like that that you can go with as well. So, okay, so we got the early warning signs. Now let's go over here. So we're going back over here to planning. What are the positives of planning? And they don't have to be related to the previous things. Yeah, they give you a target, right? Yeah, yeah. You have a commitment other people can hold you accountable to. That's arguably a good thing. Yeah, I mean, it's good to let people know, especially if you have market conditions or stuff like that, right? I mean, you got stock price writing on our new awesome feature going out the door, like planning's kind of critical for that, right? All right, so what else does planning help for? Okay, tell me more about that.
Best way I can elaborate on that is, as I came from, we had a QA. She would show up at your desk. She'd say, I put my troublemaker hat. Even though I knew she was gonna be wrong.
XQA, favorite words.
She was unbelievable at a way to break them.
Oh, yeah, it's like a magical thing, right?
Yeah.
I feel like real QA people, they have an aura and shit just breaks around them.
And it was just unfathomable
Yeah.
how she came up with this stuff, like, right, we need to account for this.
Yeah, so I want to add that in 2 different ways, because I think you're making 2 very good points. The first is increased intentionality about the work we're about to perform. So the more intentional we are, and the more we know about the work we're going to do, that's great. But 2, you get a reduced bug rate as a result of that, and your error rate goes way down because you know exactly what you need before you're doing it. It's great in factories, people. Like, this is why factories exist. You have QA just hitting that line, and it is very smooth because of that. Unfortunately, not all areas are like factories, right? So, polls. What else? What else is a positive? Oh, sorry.
You're gonna do that slide, not here.
Oh, so I got to pass this around. Got to use. I'm sorry if I'm loud, people on the internet. Okay, so over here, anyone else have a positive they want to lay out for planning? I'm going to pick on the people that are quiet over here. Any one of y'all. Yeah, have a clearly defined scope, high clarity, right? Absolutely. I forgot again, Drew. This is not. I'm not built for microphones, people on the internet. I'm sorry. Okay, so what would be some ways we could take these negatives from Agile and transform them into those positives? And before you say something, make sure you ask for the mic so the people that are online can help. Look at how I just defer that responsibility. You'll find out I'm also very comfortable with silence. So to recap some of the negatives, not delivering, not having the clarity, having a higher error rate. How can we turn those into those positives? What are some early next steps? Thank you. Just, yeah.
So one way that you can do it is to set release dates, work to those release dates with your MVP.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's several ways to do that that aren't feeling super rigid. I would advocate on a separate note, Actionable Agile as a book that deals with Monte Carlo simulations for projection of work. It's a great way to use your history to tell your future versus gut check of when you think something's going to get done. But absolutely. What's something else we can do over here or establish in our world that exists on a continuum? Doesn't have to be all the way over here. Could even be agile practices that adopt some of this. I'm going to call out one if no one else does. Give a hint. It comes out of safe school of thought. Not my favorite one, but they're growing. This is everybody. Pipelining. You build sprints into a quarter, right? Now you have a larger box for larger amounts of work at an epic level or feature, depending on what you call it, that you can negotiate as well and hold people to a higher level commitment and understanding as a result. Hey, you committed to X epics, you were only able to complete Y epics. What stopped you? How can we grow? That's going to get you up here too, but like here, not all the way up there. It's kind of here because you're still asking questions and not pushing real hard. You're moving into the planning though. What else you got for moving into planning? What would be some steps? Left side, don't make me pick on you again. Like that, I created duality here already, right side and left side. Well, what I'll say is outside of that is bugs. How are you going to solve for bugs? More detailed requirements that can happen on any level, right? So the one that's coming to my brain is a user story is a conversation or is a card for conversation. That's like super agile, right? But hey, wait a second, our bug rate's going really high. Maybe we need to add more detailed requirements on these cards so that we can have some clarity. And I bet most of you exist in this world where there are more than just a sentence on a story, right? So you've already started to protect against some of the negative side effects, but you can enhance that more and drive that clarity higher as a result. All right. Just feel bad because I feel like are there any questions? Because this is kind of where this ends, and I can go into the last bit that I had that was optional, which is conversations, which how to inspect your own conversations to improve these things, because what you bring to the table in these conversations is tricky because you have your own set of opinions, beliefs, and experience well of your own. So when you're having these conversations, all that shit's got to be left back there. Because you bring any of that, all those become assumptions like we talked about before, and they're going to get in the way of solving the actual problem. So the last thing, I'll talk to it real quick and then hand it over. And if anyone does want to hear any more, this book called Agile Conversations is amazing. And the one thing I want to share is there's a tea table. It's the first time I've seen one outside of a, accounting class and internet. If you hold that for a second. Tricky to do with one hand. Here we go. I got it right away. So I'm going to show the camera and then y'all. This is a tea table for inspecting your own conversations. Good? Okay. And I'll just bring it around. Right side, you're my favorite. You get it first. So, and I'm going to go into what it kind of breaks down, but this is a very, very powerful tool to understanding your own head and how to leave that stuff behind rather than bring it with you into these discussions. And the thing is, it's really straightforward, guys. It's almost a form of journaling. So one side is the conversation itself. What I said, wrote down. What they said on the next line, wrote down, and back and forth. And you're not going to remember exactly. Give yourself some grace, guys. But the things that are going to stick out to you, those are things that matter. The things you should write about, not necessarily the minutia. So one side, what actually was said. And then on the other side, where they speak. I feel like I'm set this down real quick here. Using that as a prop. The other part is what you thought or felt when they spoke. So when you say something like, hey, we need to switch to Agile, and they say, you know what? I think you, this process and everything about this is terrible. Like, well, I'm highly offended by that statement. Write that down. That's a pretty obvious one, right? But there are, to use a word I don't like to use in this context, triggers, everybody has them. Everybody has things that their mind will automatically jump to assumptions over. You've been trained this way. Everybody has. It's experience about having a single point of view. It's just how it works. You assume. This, by writing out these and reviewing them later once the dust has settled, you start to identify where and what you are passionate about and avoid having that inserted into a conversation where you're looking to achieve a goal. I'm not telling you not to be passionate. I'm just telling you not to do it in a way that's going to be detrimental to what you ultimately want to do, which is, convince the other person to do a thing or align with them to do a thing, depending on the situation, right? So this tool, you don't need the book, it's online, but highly recommend trying that, especially when you feel like you've had a difficult conversation, because it's on both sides. It's coming from someone who's had a lot of difficult conversations. It's also been the cause of most of them. And without this book, I don't think I would have gotten to that. It's excellent for inspecting your mindset and seeing like what's important to you, what matters, and how you can back away from it and deliver it more neutrally to a wider group. With that, thank you for coming today and listening to me speak. I do appreciate it. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, happy to give it back. Yeah, Drew, it's your turn. Fair enough.
Yeah, I knew it. Mark.
Oh, no. Not you. You're neither left nor right. Did you catch that?
No, I did not. Because I'm doing the tech. No, I do actually have a legitimate question for you here is what happens when you encounter somebody who is resistant to your viewpoint on a philosophical basis, as in you're wrong because you're wrong and I'm not going to listen, neener.
Philosophy now, right? Okay, give me an example, actually, before I take the mic from you. Or
All right, one of my favorites here. I was working at a role a while back where we were introducing continuous integration.
Mhm.
Great concept. Everybody loved it. There was one guy in particular who was really gung-ho about setting up CI/CD.
Mhm.
And he was so gung-ho that he wanted to fire everybody from QA because the concept of quality analysis is a gate and all gates are bad. And he would not listen to any.
Sure. Okay, so that's a really good one. This is actually one that has to be broken into several parts. So, okay. So first, there's really kind of like, I'll say 3 schools, but there's more, right? The first is, what's the power dynamic involved before we talk to anything else? Are you their boss? Are they your boss? Are you peers? And so I'm going to give something for each one of those. Okay. You're the boss. You're the boss. This is our direction. We're not going to fire our people. I want you to come along on this journey with me, but you're going to have faith and trust in me that I'm going to hear you. But like, we still need to make sure our work, meets quality threshold, right? Not your boss. They're the boss. We'll put it that way. I strongly advocate, do all the things, but they're your boss. End of the day, this is what's called a learning experience. If they don't want to do it and you're not in control, there's not much you can do about this except create the conditions for understanding that lead to change. So the difference here is it's not, yep, I'm gonna lean super hard into what you said and proactively fire everybody. No, no, no. So what will happen, or what do you see the outcome in these situations? And I'm diving into some coaching here. So brief detour. What questions are best for this? Why questions are dicey, especially with leadership and things like that. Say, why did you think this was going to be successful? Is a bad idea. What were your intentions when you did this? Are great, especially upwards. You get their mindset. They might have a really good point that we didn't think about. They might be like, well, we're going to make developers into QE2. We're going to call them S-debts, and they're not going to test their own work because Mark hates that. But there could be a philosophical reason behind that. Like, well, we're going to shift to where the person doing the code is also going to eat their own dog food or eat somebody else's as a result. So you don't know that unless you ask. So clarify with them. Set conditions and basically tripwires to say, well, where will we know that this is a problem going forward, that we don't have quality in place? And a lot of times by proactively asking those questions before a decision is actually made, you stop that decision from being made because they realize all the potential things they didn't think about. So offering your insight and opinion to a leader is important without forcing it upon them. Drew is shocked to hear this from me, by the way. This is not how I used to function. I used to function poorly, but aggressively. From, yeah, exactly. And the third is with a peer. And a peer, you can really take either of the previous approaches. But at the end of the day, the question is like, okay, how do you see this working for you and who will it impact as you're to a peer? Like, if they're a leadership peer, you need to speak with a leadership voice to them, have a conversation about how this is going to be a bad thing, or like, you can't do this way. Here's where this is going to happen. And last of all, the word that no one likes, but is at the end of every single one of these, is escalate to your own leader and theirs. If you can't solve the problem and it's too far down that path, you have to ring the bell for at some point of the way. And that sucks, but you need to be that person. If you can't be that person, I'm going to say all of you are in the wrong job that can't be that person, because you need to ring the bell. No one else is going to do it because they're focused on exactly where they are in the org. So if you see a bigger problem, you got to be the ones to bring it up the flagpole and say, hey, this is actually really important. If we don't do this, it's going to hurt us. Because they're going to be like, my world will be fine. That's all I care about. But your world is much broader than any one manager or one focused team. And you have to pay attention to that because you're the ones that can bring that experience and insight to those situations. All right. How was that, Drew? Did I get it? Good. What else we got? Any other kind of questions? Or I can walk through some examples if anyone has something that they're like real life. I can touch on that as well. Oh, thought you had another one. I was going to throw the mic at you. You good? All right. In that case, thank you all for coming. I appreciate it.